Ladies and gentlemen, Jerry's about to come on and rock your freaking world, talking about success, failure, and changing what's possible. Before that, though, let's talk about if you are an influencer, an entrepreneur, someone who wants to change the world, and you want to impact the world in a bigger way. Come talk to me. I have a couple different options. Number one, I can connect you with these amazing human beings who come on the show, like Jerry, who's about to come on. If you think that that would be a beneficial relationship, you want to dive into their services, what they have, and keep growing yourself with them. Number two, if you think you're a great messenger visionary and you want to get your message out on the 12-hour marathon, talk to me. Let's see if it's a good fit for you to get your message out on this platform. Or number three, if you want to start your own podcast and get your message out to the world in that way with your own platform, talk to me as well. Would love to help you start your podcast and start making your own movement and impacting people in the world in a bigger way. So you can message me on Facebook, Instagram at I am Millionaire Chris, or find me on email as well, chris@beyourgps.com. Would love to hear from you there. Let's talk about the iTunes review of the week. This week it's by Rach Gibster 13. Actionable tips to up-level your life. I absolutely love what Chris has done with his podcast. He brings such great energy to each episode and really leaves you with actionable tips you can implement today to make a change. That's the most important part. Get your ass in gear today. So grateful to be taught by him. Thanks so much, Rach. If you want to give us a review, go to beyourgps.com/iTunes or search Becoming Your Greatest Possible Self in the iTunes store and give us a review, subscribe, and make sure you stay connected for the future episodes because we got even more greatness coming to you to help you become your GPS. I'm going to introduce Jerry in just a second. Before that, though, grab a piece of paper, grab a pen, because this guy is an absolute freaking powerhouse in business. And just, he's going to give you a ass kicking, like a kick in the face to wake you up to your greatness so you can have even more happiness, even more fulfillment, even more success because you deserve it. So let's step up to the plate. I'm going to introduce him, and then we'll bring him on the screen. Jerry Brazie is a husband, father, and entrepreneur who has 8 brothers and sisters, with Jerry being child number 7. He grew up a poor kid from Portland, Oregon, with no education, training, or advantages in life. Getting his first job at 11, stealing food to eat, and living on the streets at 17, violence was a way of life for him. Determined to make it out of his surroundings, Jerry worked more than 20 jobs before starting his first business at 28. And over the last 20 years, his companies have generated over $450 million in revenues and a lifetime of experience. Having had thousands of employees, Jerry has owned all types of businesses, from a large transportation company to car washes, gas stations, and convenience stores. In addition, he owns and manages 150,000 square feet of commercial real estate and has built multiple residential developments with hundreds of lots. Jerry has built, remodeled, rented, and sold more houses than he can remember. A serial entrepreneur, Jerry has now made it his mission to educate others that grew up like him, teaching that there is opportunity and hope if you are willing to do what it takes. And we are blessed to have this legend here with us today. Jerry, are you ready to rock the house, man?
Man, legend. That is, you're putting the pressure on me a little early here. I'll take
Own
it,
it, man. Own it.
Yeah, for sure. Wow.
I seriously appreciate you being here. You got a ton of wisdom and experience that a lot of people are hungry for. And I know you're going to be able to share that with our audience and, at least give them a taste of your life and what you've gone through and where you've gotten to because of your perspective and wisdom. So really appreciate you being here, man.
Sure. Yeah. Let me ask you first, how's the day going so far? You've been at this all day. That's the marathon's a perfect word for this. You doing well?
Fired up, man. I'm fired up,
feeling?
baby.
Yeah, cool.
Greatest possible self, carrying the torch. Woo!
For sure. Well, I'll give you the quick story on me. Like you said in the intro there, that's growing up that way. And that's kind of what I come from. I have 8 brothers and sisters, and I'm number 7. So, and my parents had 6 kids when they were 22 years old. So my older brothers and sisters, there's 6 of them. And then 7 years later, they had me. And so there's kind of a big difference between my older kids, or the older kids, and then me. And I have a little brother that's 22 months younger than me, and I have a little sister that's 4 years younger. So, again, when you grow up like that, this was in the 70s, you grow up hungry and starving for everything that you can get a hold of, be it food, or in some cases, just be it attention or whatever it is. So that was kind of like a way of life for me. And then as I got older, the first job I had, I was 11 years old, and this is what the story I always tell. I paid taxes as an 11-year-old. I had a real job. They took taxes out, I remember. And I remember my paycheck at the end of the day for washing dishes at this local restaurant was $17.35. And I took it down to the Century Market right around the corner, and I cashed it. And they cashed it, and I got all ones. And I got all ones because it was $17, 17 single bills that I was able to then wad up, and it made it look like I had a lot of money. And that's the first time that I had ever had money in my life. This is the same Century store that we'd regularly get caught stealing from, and kind of as the neighborhood kids, they knew who we were. And that was really the first time that I had my own money and I was able to buy something myself. Consequently, since 11 years old, I've never missed a day of work, and I've never not had a job. So you're talking, I was born in 69, so you're talking 1980. So through multiple recessions, multiple downturns, multiple high unemployment, I've never not had a job. And as you said in the interview, probably 20 jobs since then before I went out and started my own at 28 years old.
Dude, that is freaking powerful, man. And I love, like, you know your story. You own it, and you're like, that's who I was. This is where I am. And we've absolutely, just scratched the surface, man. And I love it, Jerry. I also want to ask you a question before we dive in any more. And that's really the theme of the day. We wanted to ask each guest, how do you trust your guidance in times of conflict? I'm sure you've had business conflicts, personal conflicts, like all kinds of incredible, like, tumultuous times. Like, how did you guide yourself and lead yourself through those times, man?
Meaning, let me make sure I understand the question. You're asking me when it got hard or things get difficult, how do I kind of keep going on the straight and narrow?
Yeah, how do you keep going? And especially, like, what do you look to for, like, guidance for, like, inner stamina and faith or anything like that leads you?
This is going to sound terrible, but it's 100% true. I think I'm Superman. I think I can do anything. Yes. And so I'll give you an example. In 2004, I had a major competitor go out of business. My company was at that point 6 years old, and a major competitor went out of business. And we hired 50 plus employees in 1 month. And my business is the size it is and has all the resources that it has now because of that 1 month. Well, I went 8 days and slept 45 minutes on the third day. So on a 45-minute nap on 8 straight days of working. It's impossible to do, right? But I did it because I had no choice. So I worked all day bringing on all of this new business, and then I worked all night on the new business that we brought on, meaning, you have to do all the administrative side. You got to get all the hiring done, all the dispatching, all the driving, all the trucks. You got to ramp up all of the transportation side, all the logistics. And then at night, the actual work would come in and have to be done. So the company's sitting here today because I was able to work for 8 straight days on a 45-minute nap. Conversely, and this is sort of interesting, when you do that, I've done that multiple times where I've gone 3 or 4 days without sleep, building a company over the last 20 years. And what happens is after the hardest day, this is a question I always get asked, so I'll answer it right off the top. The hardest day is always the third day. So the first 48's fairly easy. And then that third day for me has always been the killer. And if you can, and that's why I took a 45-minute nap on the third day. If you can get through the third day, I call it the top of your head, maybe the top 25% of your head kind of gets numb. Yeah, I mean, clearly it's not good for you, but the top 25% of your head gets numb. And after that, it was clear sailing. So I got to the end of the 8-day one, and I went home, and my wife made dinner for me, and I ate dinner, and I was like, man, I'm going to bed. And I went to bed, Chris, and I couldn't sleep. I was so jacked up. And my body, my mind was so clear on what we were doing. I just wasn't going to sleep, and my body accepted that, and my mind accepted that. So kind of that gives you an idea into what it takes when you're growing in a new business in particular, but B, kind of the mindset that I have. No, there's never anything. I don't treat business as emotional. So no matter how ugly it gets, and I mean, I'm in a business that is, you're only as good as the last thing that you did, be it building houses, be it on the transportation side, be it washing cars, convenience store, whatever it is, the businesses that I am in, you're only as good as your last transaction. And so inherent in that can be an emotional part to it where you say to yourself, or you want to say to the customer, look, I've done 100 orders for you correctly. You're critiquing me on the last one. Yes, that's right. That's the nature. And that's the nature of business in general. And so for me, it doesn't matter how ugly it gets. It doesn't matter how difficult it gets. I still sleep well at night, and I put my feet on the floor with absolute confidence that I'm going to be able to destroy whatever's in front of me. And then if I don't get that done, I hold myself accountable to it. I'm introspective and I self-assess every single day. I'm incredibly introspective. And if I don't get it done, I try to figure out what I did wrong, why I didn't get it done that day, put my feet on the floor the next morning, right back to hammering.
When did you start self-assessing yourself every single day?
My foray into business comes from, like I said, I took jobs. I had 20 different jobs as I worked my way up, and I landed on one job where I took a job driving because I thought, hey, this is good. I like to drive and I have a car. So I took a job as a messenger. I was 21 years old. Mm-hmm. And within about a year of doing that, I realized, actually, there's two stories here, one to answer your question, but I realized within a year of doing this that the dispatcher they had was not very good. The company was about 35 employees at the time. And so I went to the owner. Now, it gives you some idea about the type of kid that I was. I'm 21 years old. I'm a street kid. I'm 3-4 years removed from living in a flop house, $25 a week, with hookers and heroin addicts sharing a bathroom. That's where I lived when I was 17 years old. So now I'm 21 years old. I go to the owner of the business and I said, look, I think I can dispatch better than the person that you have. And let me prove it to you. You're paying her probably $40,000, $50,000 a year. She says, yes. I said, okay, pay me $10 an hour for 6 months. You pay me $10 an hour for 6 months, and I'm going to show you how that job could be done. And then at the end of $10 or at the end of 6 months, I'm going to come back and you're going to pay me what you're paying her. Now, Chris, I knew exactly how I was going to spend $10 an hour. I hadn't made much more than $12 or $15 an hour in my life, and this is 20 plus years ago. So I couldn't even think. I mean, I was as straight faced and poker faced as I could be when I said, I'll come back and get that 45 grand. I'm like, I wouldn't even know how to spend that kind of money. So $10 an hour, I go to work literally 10, 12 hours a day. In over 6 months, we started to add employees and add new business. And at the end of 6 months, it was an easy call for her. She gave me the job. I was making 45, 50 grand a year. And I started to manage the business for her. So I started to gain a reputation in Portland. I was really good at what I did, which was operations and dispatch. And I ran that company for about 7 years. At the end of that time, we were about $5.5 million with 110 employees. Wow. So about that time, I get an offer when I'm 28 years old to come and run another company, start a new company. And this is to answer your question, to start a new company. And they sent me a prospectus, kind of a pro forma. Right. And I didn't know what I was looking at. I mean, I knew they were coming to me because of what I knew, but I didn't know what a pro forma was. I didn't know what the numbers were. I had never seen a P&L or a balance sheet. I had no idea what a pro forma was. And I remember sitting there as an office in Northwest Portland, as clear as day. I was 28 years old. And I remember having it like I have this sheet of paper in front of me, looking at it. And I said to myself, I don't know what in the fuck I'm looking at. I don't know what this is. And I said to myself, Jerry, either you shut up and start to listen, or you're going to be making $45,000 a year dispatching when you're 50. I just turned 50 this year. And I remember at 28 years old, this epiphany hit me, and it said, this is what's going to happen to you if you don't shut up and listen. And it was at that point that I changed my whole mindset. I changed my whole personality. I changed my whole approach. And I went from being the street kid to being somebody who was as voracious a person as you could find to read and to learn. So I almost overnight got rid of all of the friends that I had grown up with. These are guys that I hung out with at the pool halls, hung out with at sporting events, played sports with, talked sports with, went to bars with, but it was all related around things that we all were comfortable with.
Right.
And I just had this epiphany that said, man, you got to get uncomfortable. And so I went out at 28 years old and I got uncomfortable, and I surrounded myself with people that were a lot smarter than me, which very difficult for me to do because I had always kind of been the smartest guy in the room in the group of people that I had hung out with. And so from that epiphany, where I said I need to change the way that I behave. I need to absorb as much information as I can, and then I need to put that to use in a positive way that will affect me for the better successfully as I move forward. So I went to the library, and these days, this is 22 years ago. So off to the library I go, get every magazine and book, Fortune, Forbes, and I had no sense of what business really was. I did, as I've said, I come from nothing. So if I can make it, I knew nothing. And so I knew operations when I was 28 years old, which is just kind of remembering where people go and how to place them and what things work in what order and where places are in town and things of that nature. But I didn't know anything about business or the game of business. I bought a house when I was 21 years old. I didn't know what a mortgage was. I just knew that I needed to buy a house because I probably saw one on TV, right? Saw somebody buy a house on TV. I said, well, hell, fuck, that's what people do. I need to buy a house. So I went and bought a house not knowing what a mortgage was. Subsequently, I used that house 4 times. I paid 12% interest on that first loan on an $82,000 house. And from that, I used that house 3 different times to mortgage my business. When I bought the house, remember, I didn't know what a mortgage was. I didn't know what an interest rate was. And I didn't know what a refi was. So I had no idea how equity worked. When I say I knew nothing, I knew absolutely nothing. But I was street smart and I knew how to work. And so that epiphany I had at 28 years old was kind of the turning point for me where I said, I need to calm down. I need to approach this analytically. I need to not let my typical emotional self, which is that pissed off street kid, always having to defend himself, always having to be right, can't show any weakness. When you grow up on the street, you can't show any, particularly when I grew up, which is in the 70s, show weakness, they're going to take advantage of you. It's not like the world is today. And so it was that violent existence where you're fighting all of the time just to prove that you can fight, not necessarily about who's right or wrong. It just became a way of life. And so I had to filter all of that out. This is nobody telling me what to do. This is me not taking any instruction. This is literally, I got a pro forma prospectus in front of me telling me what the business should look like for the next 12 months. It was a set of financials. I didn't know what the fuck it was. That was the key for me that said, shut up and listen.
This is gold. This is gold. So I think when people are struggling today and they're not getting the results that they want and they're hitting their head on the wall, I think that's an opportunity to say, listen, I might be acting or showing up like I know what I'm doing, but in reality I don't. And then to go seek the help and the guidance, talk to Jerry and say, hey, I have no freaking clue what I'm doing in business. What would you do? And stop pretending like you have all those answers. And by the way, this is gold, Jerry. You're sharing some really powerful stuff. And if you're listening or watching this right now, make sure you take a screenshot, tag at Jerry Brazie in your comments on Instagram stories or on Facebook stories. And if you have any questions for Jerry, would love to hear what those are, because this is really powerful. And I know one of the things that you harp on is people's instant gratification mentality that they're in today, right? Like people building e-commerce businesses and thinking that's a business. I want to hear your perspective on that, man.
Well, there's no shortcuts in life. Life doesn't provide any shortcuts. So anytime you think you're going to get a shortcut, somebody's trying to take something from you that they shouldn't get. I always say the only shortcuts in life is robbing a bank, and just don't get caught, because that's the only way to get rich quick. And I think that the perspective today on expectation is all fucked up. It takes, let me tell everybody, and this is what you get from me. I talk quick. I'm dedicated myself to business. I think that I understand it as well as anybody based on the experiences I've had coming where I've come from and gotten to where I have. So I can speak with authority on what it takes to start a business. And let me tell everyone, it takes 12 to 15 hours a day, 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week for decades. Now, I started mine when I was 28. the first business I started, I grew it to $3 million in the first year. I think the average size of the business in the United States is like $600K a year. So I grew mine. I did $3 million and I had 100 employees in the first year.
Damn.
I remember I didn't remember what in the hell I was doing. So the investors that I had didn't have enough money and they couldn't finance my growth. And so then I went out on my own the next year and started what is now, we just celebrated our 20th anniversary, and started all over again. And I didn't get paid for months, for years. Really, I didn't get a full paycheck. So I had a company that did, what did we do? Then we took it and did $3 million. I did $3 million the first year. I did $8 million the second year. I did $12 million the third year, and I did $14 million the fourth year. The first 4 years of owning my business, at an average ticket price of $9 a piece, I had $14 million in revenue. And so I had, 225 employees at this point. And so but with that, and with a company that size, I was working all day long, and then I couldn't afford to pay myself in those first couple of years. So I would go referee basketball games for $20 a game, and I would work until 6:30 at night. I would ref from 7 until 11, get 4 games in. I'd get home at midnight, back up at 5, and start all over again. I did that for 6 days a week, and on Saturday and Sunday, I would ref 9 basketball games. And I did that, Chris, for a fucking decade.
Damn.
To pay the bills.
Damn.
That's what it takes. That's the kind of work and perseverance that it takes. And I think that entrepreneurship has gotten fouled up lately, in that you have the Shopifys and the drop shippers and all of this get rich. How can we get rich quick? How can we make money fast? I see it on Reddit all the time. On my podcast, I bitch about it all the time. I try to interact on Reddit, but every other question is, I have $500. How do I turn it into $5,000 in a year? That was the question the other day. You know what I wrote?
What?
I said, you need to take the $500, put it in the bank, go get a full-time job, save $375 of that money every month, put it in the bank next to the 500, and at the end of the year, you have $5,000. That was my answer. There's no way to get rich quick. There's no way to do this in any way. And I think the other thing too is you have such extremes, particularly when it comes to Silicon Valley. So you have these 28 and 30-year-old multi-billionaires, and good for them, right? They did it, but they're called unicorns for a reason. Yep. They don't exist, and yet they get all of the publicity. Or on the other side of that, you have the celebrities that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars and have millions of Instagram followers. And I think that those two dynamics, or those two examples, get held up as the specific example of an entrepreneur, when in reality, I know a lot of business owners, a lot. I belong to a CEO group for 20 years full of business owners. Reality is what I just described to you. It's 180 degrees, the opposite of what I think pop culture, media, what you see out there every day, what gets all the attention, what gets all the clicks. That's not entrepreneurship. Startups and raising money and Series A and B rounds and all the rest of that, that's a very small percentage of what business is in America. Yeah. And I think that that's gotten bastardized by media and by popular culture to reflect entrepreneurship as something other than what reality is. So
it's glamorous. It's glamorous. It's the freedom. It's you can have anything you want if you just do X, Y, and Z. And that's the X, Y, and Z is be an entrepreneur and like post about it and build an online brand. I wanted to ask you about, with all the information that we have available today with podcasts, with coaches and support groups and Chamber of Commerce and all these things, do you feel that it's easier to become more successful today than it was 40 years ago, 30 years ago?
You asked me that because we just talked about this on my podcast, so I'm ready for this question. A couple of podcasts ago. Think about when I started. Yeah. I mean, if we want to argue about whether or not it's easier, let's think about when I started. When I started, I had to go to the library and wait for that book that I'm looking for on business. When I started, I had to buy the book. Money or not, you had to get your hands on it some way. I would go to the bookstore, to the Barnes and Noble, and because the Fortune magazine would come in, just like I did when I was a little kid reading comic books. I couldn't afford the comic books, so I would wait for the comic book to come in. Then I'd go sit at the mall and read the comic books. I did the same thing with Fortune. This is a grown man, and I would go and read the Fortune and the Forbes magazine, maybe Inc. magazine, a couple other ones, whatever I could get my hands on. I would stand at the news rack and read it as long as they'd let me because I couldn't afford to buy the magazine. Just that right there. Take that as an example of an impediment to starting a business 20 years ago compared to what you have available to you now right here.
Yeah.
Right on your phone, right in your hand, on the way to school, on the way home, on the bus, on the way to work, at lunch, on a break, anytime you want to, all weekend long. You have access to everything you need to know about starting a business and about how to reach your customers. The old-fashioned way, right? There was no social media. There was no get that reach out there. There was no direct advertising to the person that you want to talk to the way you can today via Facebook and Instagram and the other online platforms. It was all about knocking on doors and getting referrals. I mean, it was old-fashioned hard work. So I tell the kids that I talk with today that have multiple businesses that are, 35 years old and younger, you wouldn't want to compete with me at 25 years old. You wouldn't want to touch me. Nobody would want to compete with a 26-year-old Jerry in today's age, because a 26-year-old Jerry, I don't know what the fuck I'd do if I was born 20 years later. I can't imagine the difference, because I think that, relatively speaking, and this isn't, old man, no shoes to school, uphill in the snow both ways program. This is, I mean, demonstrably easier to start a business and to get off and running if you have the intestinal fortitude that it takes to do that. If you had it when I was a kid, you had a chance at being successful. And if you have it today, you have a chance of being successful. I just think that the tools and the information is so much more available to you today that I don't know what the excuse would be. To try. It doesn't mean you're going to succeed. There's no guarantee in any of this.
Right.
But the ability to try and the ability to see where other people have failed, just to hear me talk about where I come from and what's possible and what I've done wrong and what I've done right. I mean, it didn't exist 20 years ago. So yes, to answer your question, I think it took me 8 minutes to answer your question. Sorry about that.
This is gold. I want to know, what are you?
Question, yes, 1,000 times easier.
This is great. What are you learning from millennials these days?
It kind of bleeds from your last question. Another reason why I think it's so easy, or why it's not so easy, I shouldn't say that, because business is very difficult, but why it would be easier to get into business today than it was before is also the competition. So I've had, I don't know, thousands of employees over the last 20 years. And I was just on a podcast the other day talking with a guy about entrepreneurship and about people in particular. And there has been a change in the approach to work that I don't see as positive over the last, say, 7 to 8 years, where, say, this generation, and I'm not painting everybody with a broad brush here, I just want to say that as I see them coming across, the reluctance to work at the level that I think you need to, not to grow up and be a multimillionaire, just to be successful at the job you're doing, is not there. It's not there. And it's not that there's always been people that didn't want to put in the time. But I think that is becoming more and more prevalent as society becomes, we become fatter, if you will, in terms of rich, in terms of the things that we have. And so there is a perspective that is missed by the earlier generations, by these most recent generations that some of us have that are older, about how hard it is and about what life can be like. And when you don't, I don't blame anybody necessarily, because when you don't have those, it's hard to learn those.
Right.
One of the keys to my success is that I never lose perspective. I always know where I came from. So, back to your original question, how do I deal with the stress, and how do you deal with the day in and day out when it gets hard? Man, I stole food to eat. So how much harder can it be? I've been to Africa. When you've been to Africa, you want to see poverty and you want to see poor. Man, I go over to Africa. I'll tell a story. I'm over in Africa, and they take me to these buildings, and they are corrugated metal. Now, It's 115 degrees outside. They're corrugated metal. They're about, I don't know, about the size of my studio here, about maybe 15 by 15. Dirt floors, and they go on as far as the eye can see. And the lady who was welcoming me into her particular house, and house is a relative term, right? I don't know what you want to call it, but where she lived, she's sweeping the dirt floor out. Because she was so proud of this home that she had. And she's sweeping the dirt floor, and she's welcoming me in. And she had a couple of deals on the wall, and she had a small bed on the ground. She had 6 kids that lived in this thing. It's 15 by 15. And it had a 5-gallon bucket that they used for the toilet that would have to be walked 1.5 miles to the truck that came to empty it out twice a day. This is how she lived. But she was sweeping the floor to clean up this place because she was so proud of what she had. And I thought, well, holy fuck, how can I go back and complain about anything when this perspective, when I've seen true poverty, and not only poverty, but pride at the same time. So there's the poverty that goes with, or that you live with, but then there's a pride in just having what you have, which for this person was a broom and a dirt floor to sleep on and a roof over her head, be it corrugated metal in 115 degrees. So I never lose that perspective on where I came from. And so where I'm going and where I am, I guess, is a lot easier. And I think that the most recent generations don't have a lot of that because they just simply didn't have the hardship that past generations did, or certainly, I mean, it's easy enough to go on the internet and see what poverty looks like in other countries, but I don't think we're inclined to do that.
And it's like you can see it on the internet, but there's a level of detachment because of how easy it is, how quick it is to see destruction and trauma and suffering and, all this like abject poverty going on around the world. People are like, it's just more of that going on in that country. We've been desensitized to actually caring and being able to experience that at a visceral human level. But like you said, when you go to Africa and experience it in person, it's just a whole like mind-blowing experience that you can't get if you just look at it online.
That's right. But the key to this is self-assessment and introspection. You have to be able to hold yourself accountable, be it to whatever mistake you've made, or be it to the way that you approached an issue, and you might have flamed out or freaked out or went crazy or lost your patience or whatever it is. And that's where you have to back out and go, hey, I went nuts there. That kind of felt like the right thing to do. But, I just heard this guy on this podcast talking about perspective. Man, I'm kind of missing that because, that poor kid in Africa or that poor kid in Appalachia, or that poor kid right down the street in the city that I live in, he's got a completely different perspective than I do. My mind's kind of fucked up. I need to work on that. And that kind of self-assessment is absolutely critical to any kind of success.
Yeah, 100%. And I love how you said that there's some real things that millennials especially have to work on to be able to create more success, some persistence, perseverance, grit, doing whatever it takes as long as it takes. Is there any strengths that you see the millennials having that you admire or you model or you bring to the business that you do today? Because I know you're always learning, you're introspective, you're noticing and paying attention to trends and what's going on. Is there any strengths that you see in the millennials?
Yeah. And the strength that I see in them, again, I said earlier, I don't want to paint everybody with a broad brush. So the question was very specific, and those are the issues that I see. But on the flip side, and to answer this question, the same thing, the same strength that I see in millennials today is the same strength that I've seen in all generations, in all good workers. The guy that produces my show, Billy, and also does my podcast with me, he's 26 years old. He's the hardest working motherfucker I know. Right? Awesome. He's intense. He's everywhere. He's exactly where I would be. I have nephews that are in their early 20s that I've been giving advice to them for years. They're not like that. They're hardworking. They're crazy. They're moving. They're taking risks. They're challenging themselves. They're doing the things that they need to do to try and achieve that success that they want. So the same things, I think the same values and the same approach hold true today that have held true for generations. It just stands out more today because I think there are less of them.
Yeah. That's great. And I know you mentioned that you've hired like thousands of employees over the course of your lifetime. What do we need to know about like being someone who rises through the ranks and becomes a better leader, a better manager, a better executive?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, a question I get asked all the time, by the way. So that's a good one that you asked. What I always tell people is, I go back to McDonald's. When I was 16 years old, I got a job at McDonald's. And because they paid me more than whatever the job was that I had before, which is a recurring issue in my life. If I could make more money here, I would go to work there. So, and I've said this, Chris, forever, and this is, a little side note is the problem with getting rid of these low paying, low wage jobs is they're great incubators and they're great ways to learn about how the world works as a first job. So in my case, I say all the time, I owe a ton of my success and a ton of my ability to manage businesses based on what I learned working at McDonald's.
Wow.
So how does that translate into moving up? I don't know that I've ever had a job I didn't get promoted at. I can't remember one that I didn't. And here's why. When I worked at McDonald's, you did everything you could to get hours because, everything was less than 40 hours. Nobody was full time. So you did whatever you could to get hours. And so if somebody asked for a job to be done, I was right there. So they needed the vats cleaned, if you can imagine, the fryers. And there's like 10 or 15 fryers. And so I said, I'll do it. And they had this machine that you clean fryers with. It rolls on wheels and it holds all of the grease. And you have to filter the grease and get in there and scrub them out. And I don't remember specifically the numbers, but I'm going to say the person who did it before I did it took 2.5 hours. And so I said, yeah, I'll do it. You got to put new oil in, the whole 9 yards. I said, I'll do it. And like anything, I attacked it like my last breath depended on it. Damn. And I got it done in about an hour and 10 minutes, and they were spotless and clean. And the manager's like, what in the fuck just went on? I was like, what else do you have I can do? Rather than make it last for my whole shift,
yeah.
I pounded it out and I did it as fast as I could. He's like, well, the shake machine's the second shittiest job we have. That needs to be done. I was like, teach me that one. Next thing you know, I'm cleaning the shake machine. So then they come to me and they say, hey, Jerry, it's Friday night. Tomorrow night, we've got the big truck coming in that brings in all the supplies. You have to stand in a minus 30 degree, 40 degree walk-in cooler, and the truck just drops all this meat and everything else down on you. But the guy is not going to show up tomorrow. Can you do it? I was like, hell yeah. I mean, give me hours, whatever it is. So pretty soon they're coming to me. Pretty soon I'm working right there at 36, 37 hours. I forget what the minimum was or the maximum was before full time. But I was hitting it up against it every time because no matter what the job was, I took it. Conversely, they gave me an assistant to help load that up. And it took the guys before me about 6 hours and it took me 2 hours. So it's not that I'm some Superman and can move at a superhuman speed. I just attack everything like my last breath depends on it. So you want to move up in business, your approach to work needs to be the first guy in and the last guy out. If you have a 5 o'clock or you have a 9 to 5 job and you want to move up, make them send you home. That's one of the easiest ones. Don't start getting your shit ready on the desk, right? At 5 minutes till, and then you're ready to run out the door as soon as 5 o'clock hits. Don't do that. The people that I notice are the ones I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't afford overtime, but you need to go. And they're like, okay, it's okay. I got this. I want to finish up though. You don't have to pay me. And I'm like, well, no, that wouldn't be legal. I'll give you another 15 minutes. Okay. I'll give you another half an hour. And then pretty soon I'm like, man, that Michelle out there, she's a hardworking motherfucker. We need to find more work for her. We need to find something else for her to do. And the same's true for drivers or car washes or convenience store clerks. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter how menial the job is that you have. You have to attack it like it's your last breath. You have to take responsibility for that job 100%. I work with the same intensity level right now today as I did when I washed dishes as an 11-year-old. I work the same way as when I worked the produce section at Safeway. I work the same way as when I was stocking shelves at QFC. I work the same way as I did at McDonald's. I work the same way when I worked at a carpet factory. You name the fucking shitty job, I did it, and I attacked it the same way as I work today. So you want to move up? You want to get promoted? Man, fuck. In today's world, it's 1,000 times easier, I think, to get promoted than it's ever been. Because here's what I say about this, and this is why I like that you asked me the question. I think that to be above average is only average today.
Yep.
So to
Amen.
be better than everybody else, you only need to be average. I think that's the state of employment in the United States today.
Damn, dude, that is fire. I love it, Jerry. This is gold. Again, for everyone listening to this, if you're ready to just fucking work your ass off, stay tuned, because this is exactly what we're inviting you to do, and take the responsibility back, man. I hear take the power back and stop waiting for some Superman to come and save us. Stop waiting for things to get easier. I think Jim Rohn says, don't wish it were easier, wish you were better, and be better. Grow into a better human being to show up and expand and rise to the occasion.
Right. Don't look for somebody. This is my passion. So this is the whole point why I'm even talking to you. I don't have a book to sell. I don't have a training course to give you. I don't have any of that. I only have my experience, and I want kids who come from where I come from to hear and know what's possible. And what you're fed, what I was fed as a kid, and I think it's 1,000 times worse. This is why I don't blame necessarily the latest generations, because we are force-fed all day long that you can't make it, that the man is out to stop you, that the rich guys are here to fuck you, that everybody's out to take from you. It's not your fault. It's everybody else's fault. We are force-fed that on a daily basis. I got it when I was a kid. The fat cat with the top hat with the cigarette and the long thing like the Penguin and Batman used to have. I forget the fuck you call that thing. But, that was what the rich, a monocle, and he looked like the Monopoly guy, right? When I was a kid. Today, it's no different. It's you're not poor because of any responsibility of yours. You're not poor because of anything you've done. You're poor because some guy in some faraway state fucked you out of whatever it is theoretically that you were going to get. Think about how dumb that is. Think about how nonsensical that is. But, obviously there's reasons for doing that politically to give power to people, but it's just not true. There's no guarantee for success, but you got to take responsibility for everything in your life. And if you take responsibility for everything in your life, I guarantee you will have more success. Will you be a multimillionaire? No. The chances are insignificantly tiny. But will you have a chance at moving up, say, economically? Yes. Will you have a chance to move out when you come from the poor world? I say, for me, success is I graduated. My last son I have 3 kids. My last son's about to graduate from high school. To me, that's successful. I graduated all 3 of my children. Where I come from, 30% of the kids graduate. Okay. So just breaking that cycle, the kids don't do drugs. I didn't do drugs. I didn't smoke cigarettes, right? I'm breaking poverty cycles that have been in place for generations that continue. I know people who are great grandparents who are my age, right? Do that math. So that means you got pregnant at 16, your daughter got pregnant at 16, and her daughter got pregnant at 16.
Jesus.
Yeah. And it happens all of the time because it's the expectation that you're grown up with. I had no expectation again, I thought I would be hammering nails and digging ditches for my whole life because that was the only thing that I was good at, because there's nobody telling me to go do something. There's no, I went to a big high school in the middle of the city, right? Those people they're trying to just farm you through there as fast as they can. There was nobody inspiring me or telling me what to do. So when I came out, staring around going, well, fuck, what do I know how to do? I know how to work. That's what I know how to do. So I'm going to put all of my effort into working because I equated food and money. Those 2 things went together. And to this day, they still go together, food and money. And when you're working, like the next meal you're going to eat depends on it, you're going to work a hell of a lot harder.
Yep.
And so again, back to I just took 10 minutes to answer your one question. I apologize.
It's great, man. Yeah, I hear the fire, man.
That's how you get it. That's how you move up. And the other thing too, Chris, while I'm talking about it, you said something that gets, it's cliche and everybody hears it, which is, well, you have to work the 10 hours or 12 hours a day or 15 hours a day. Everybody says you got to work this hard and put in these kind of hours. And you do. There's no shortcuts. So people say it because it's true. But having said that, it's not like you can't have a life, which is the argument that I get on the other side. Well, Jerry, I have kids. What am I supposed to do? I worked for a decade, 18 hours a day for a decade. There's no bullshit 18 hours a day. It was 18 hours a day. And in that 18 hours a day, I never missed a kid event. So I would leave when there was a basketball game or a baseball game or a recital or whatever it was. I have 2 sons and a daughter. I would leave and go to that, turn around and come right back, and then stay an hour or 2 later at work because I went and did that. So I didn't sacrifice any of the time. I say I had quality time with my kids, not quantity time. And I would rather have quality time than quantity time, because what does quantity time turn into? If you're self-assessing, if you're being introspective, if you're being honest with yourself, what is quality time? Well, I got to go home by 7 so I can spend time with my kids. Motherfuckers, you go to bed, the kids go to bed at 8 o'clock and you're watching TV till midnight, right? That's what most people do. But we're not honest about that. We go, no, I need to go home because it serves your best interest. It serves what you want. It's what you were trained to do. Your dad did it. Your mom did it, right? It's what your brothers and sisters that were older than you did. It's what your friends do. So you're trained to do it. I'm saying break that. Don't believe just because you got to work 16 hours a day that you can't go do all the family stuff, because I did. And I got 3 great kids to prove that I did. And a wife will tell you that's the case. I've been married for 20. Oh, shit, I'm in trouble now. 22 years. 22 years in August. I think I got that right.
I love it. Jerry, this is gold, man. It's really, I hear if people just continuously set the rudder, the direction of their life, I'm going to give my personal fucking best every single day. If there's a job, if there's an opportunity, I'm going to attack it. I'm going to give 100%. I'm going to take 100% accountability for my life, and really just like grab life by the balls and say, I'm making this life, and anything I want to be, do, or have, I'm going to figure out a way how to do it. And especially with your kids, being there for them. It wasn't about the the quantity time. It was about the quality. It was about like, that's hey, right. How can I make my schedule work? How can I put in the massive hours and build the business and really provide that livelihood for my family and still make it there for the most important moments.
That's right. That's it. The two, one does not offset the other. The two can be done together. Yet another message that needs to be talked about, which is that you can spend the time with the kids and work the 16 hours a day. It's just what you're capable of doing. I make fun all the time on my podcast. I say, somebody says they can't get something done to me. And I'll say, well, if I put a gun to your mother's head, and if you don't get this done, let's say you don't get straight A's in school, or you don't get a certain project done on time, or whatever it is, if I put a gun to your mother's head, and if you don't complete that project on time, I'm pulling the trigger. I bet you're going to get that shit done.
Yep.
And I hold myself to that same account. That's the way that I approach business and life and everything, really, is if I don't get something done, it's my fault. Well, Jerry, the delivery guy didn't show up on time, or Jerry, the contractor didn't show up. Nope. 100% you take responsibility for it, and you'll find success. I had, again, no expectation for anything that happened to me over the last 30 years, except that I knew how to work. And starting when I was 28 years old, I started taking responsibility for everything I did. Imagine how hard that is, Chris, that you got to take responsibility for everything you do, even if you have no control over it.
Yeah.
So if you can master that, if you can get the emotion behind that under control, you're going to come out ahead, be it a promotion at your next job, be it a successful business, be it having a chance at business. But what I can tell you is if you don't master that, you greatly reduce your chances of moving up and moving forward.
Dude,
at least, as business is concerned and work.
It's so powerful.
I guess it works for family too. I mean, it's the same thing for husbands and wives and family. So
yeah, it's like, is my partner happy? Am I happy? I take 100% responsibility for creating a relationship that works for both of us. Going the extra mile, doing what it takes. It's usually the little things that work in relationships that make the biggest difference. Writing a note every once in a while, or preparing the food, or like whatever. Just the extra thought and sentiment to make sure that they know that you care about them, you're thinking about them, you're the most special person to them. It's kind of similar in business. It's like I go the extra mile for my customers, for my clients, to make sure that they have an incredible experience, and they're not going to say, Chris isn't treating me that good today, or I don't really know if he cares about me, but this other guy, like, that looks like an amazing opportunity. That makes they have this amazing experience. I'm going to go over there. If I did that, if that I was being that person, then they would leave me and I would lose a customer. So it's like up to me to deliver that extraordinary experience every single time.
Right. That's exactly right. And in that, when you're starting to take responsibility for everything, all of these opportunities will come to you. And this is the other point I want to make about that is grabbing hold of those opportunities. And they're not going to just materialize out of nowhere. You have to put yourself in a position to be ready and able to grab whatever the opportunity is. So that means that you have to communicate. So I would add to your point that you have to communicate, be it communicate with your wife or your husband, like you said, or communicate with your employers or your customers. And particularly if I was to talk to employees about moving up with their employers, communication's 100%, but that employee, you take responsibility for everything, communicate that you want more or you'd like more money. The employer will come back and say, I'm sorry, I can't pay you more. You don't go, well, that guy's out to fuck me, or my boss hates me, or the manager hates me, or this place is bullshit, like they all do. And then you get with that little sewing circle that everybody does at lunch, and you're all commiserating about what a shitty company it is. And then you go back and go to work. See, that's where I say, motherfuckers, unemployment is 3.5%. There's jobs everywhere, as long as if you want to go get them. If you're not happy, shut up, don't complain, go somewhere else. The responsibility for happiness is on you. It's not on your boss. It's not on your manager. It's not on the business owner. It's on you. And if they're not giving you what you want, go. Every job I had, I left because they couldn't pay me as much as the next job. I gave them the opportunity. I talked to them about doing it, but they couldn't. And that's fine. I didn't hate them for it. I didn't talk shit about them. I'm sitting here telling you I'm sitting here because I worked at McDonald's. McDonald's was one of the best jobs I ever had. So, but they couldn't pay me as much as Safeway could. And so I moved to Safeway. And Safeway couldn't pay me as much as Carpet could. And so I moved to that. On and on and on and on to all these shitty jobs. But that's all of the responsibility resting with me. And my happiness resting with me, and then communicating with people, many times uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. I call them adult conversations, which people hate having adult conversations, is how you get shit done.
Tell us more about that, those adult conversations. How did you approach those and really have those more often? And how can we as an audience invite ourselves or stand up and step up to that level more often?
Well, the first thing you have to understand is that generally speaking, most of us are passive aggressive, right? So you have built into you a certain amount of passive aggressiveness. And that passive aggressiveness is telling you that when you need to go do something difficult, anybody listening will recognize this. When you need to go do something difficult that you don't want to do, you find a reason not to do it, and then you work it up in your head that's going to be 1,000 times harder than you think it is. So that when you're finally forced to go do it, it's not nearly as difficult as it was. So that's number one. You have to recognize that we are all fundamentally passive aggressive, and you have to work to get past that by, again, introspection, being aware of it. Those are very important. Once you've done that, then you can go to work on it. But the other side of that uncomfortable conversation is, let's say the uncomfortable conversation is asking for more work at a job, things that people hate to do. As an owner and as an employer, I'm telling you that people make it 1,000 times more difficult on themselves than they need to be. Because if you come to me and you want more money, that's great. Let's talk about either you deserve it or you don't. And I think that the conversation doesn't happen because too many people know what the answer to that question is. Your boss should bring you money, not the other way around. But I don't blame them if they don't. I've not done enough to get their attention. So that when I go sit down and say, hey, you know, Mike, I think I'm probably time for a raise. It's been a while and I'm doing a shit ton of work and I really feel like I'm providing a lot of value to you. What do you think? Mike goes, dude, I've been so busy. I missed you. No problem. Done. Anything else I can do for you? Jerry, just keep working the way you have. Or they're like, yeah, dude, you're not hitting it. It's just not working. You're like, wait, but I'm working my ass off. You people suck. Yeah. Okay. So that's how it typically goes. You people suck. This place sucks. Nobody will pay me what I'm worth. You never get paid. Anyway, side note, you never get paid what you think you're worth, ever. It'll never happen. And so those kind of difficult conversations related to going for a job or related to, particularly working on something you don't know, like say getting a mortgage is so complex that we put it off because it seems so onerous. And then, you just do one little part of it and that part's done. And then you do one little part of it and pretty soon 20% of it's done. You can't do 100% of 10 things, but you can do 100% of one. You can do 100% of two. So we don't jump on the mountain. We don't try to climb the mountain because we're trying to climb it all at once. You got to have perspective. You got to be smart about it. You got to understand and be rational about how your brain works so that you can attack the problem. So if you try to attack all 10 things, you're never going to do it. I don't care what it is, but if you try to attack one or two things, you're going to have a hell of a lot more success. And then Chris, what's success breed?
Success, baby.
It breeds more success. It's pretty simple, and that's 100% true. Yeah. So, in terms of hard conversations, that would be that's what I would encourage everyone to do: is recognize when you don't want to do it. You probably should, but that's in terms of success and living life. If you're not uncomfortable, you're fucking it up. If you're not, you got to live uncomfortable. Sorry, I didn't even ask you if I could cuss. Sorry, dude.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah. Let it rip, man.
As I've cussed for an hour and I didn't even realize it. If you're not uncomfortable, I don't think, if you want to be successful and you want to move up and move forward, if you want any shot at that, you have to get used to living uncomfortable. I haven't had a comfortable day since I was born. I mean, it's been a rough ride many times. But even once I got assets and had different things, I still live in the uncomfortable. I'm always pushing always pushing. I'm never content. Maybe that's, we could discuss, that's a different podcast, whether or not that's okay. But I'm never content, and I'm always pushing, and I want to be uncomfortable. I want to be the dumbest guy in the room whenever I can. I want to have to ask more questions. How many times do we not ask questions because we're embarrassed that we don't know it?
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous. That is so working against what most people are trying to achieve. They don't understand that they're working against themselves. Ask the stupid question. I will ask you. Billy's sitting right here. My producer's sitting right straight across the table from me. And he'll tell you, when it comes to tech, I love tech. I love technology. I love everything. But I don't exactly understand everything. So he'll tell me, take this and we do this and we swap it with this, and then we'll just bring it, like setting up all the stuff for your podcast here. Yeah. I was like, man, you got to talk slower. I got you. I understand at 30,000 foot, but I want to understand specifically. Yeah. You got to talk to me like I'm a third grader. And then sometimes I'll bring out a piece of paper and say, get a crayon, because I don't understand. Now, this is the 26-year-old kid who works for the, super successful 50-year-old me. And I'm like, fuck, I don't understand. I don't give a fuck what people think. I want the information, and I don't understand. And Billy's smarter than I am when it comes to all things tech. How does it benefit me at all to pretend like, because I'm older or wiser or have more things, that I'm somehow better than he is and I should know what the answer is, or I'm embarrassed to ask what the answer is? It's ridiculous, and it makes no sense, but it's what we do. It's what I see all of the time. And that inability of people to want to be wrong. I want to be wrong. I want to be uncomfortable, and I don't give a fuck what anybody thinks. So I will ask that question 10 times. Literally, I'll ask it 10 times. Dude, I'm sorry. It's not coming true. Hit me with that one more time. Let's try it again.
Yeah.
He's shaking his head. He's shaking his head yes across the table from me. So he knows exactly what I'm talking about.
I love it, Jared. This is gold. And I want to ask a question about being a leader. What is your perspective on how you feel your employees and managers underneath you, so to speak? How do they relate to you?
Look, I don't think I'm a very good, I think I'm a good leader. I don't think I'm a good trainer. I don't think I'm a good teacher, because, as you can see, I'm pretty intense. And the things that I go out to learn come easy to me. So I have the ability to learn, and once I learn it, it usually comes fairly easily to me. So, and the things that I know how to do really well that I teach, to me, I don't understand why I have to tell you 5 times. So I know this about myself, and I try to be super patient in doing it, but I don't think I'm a very good trainer. So when I do train, I'm constantly aware that I'm not a very good trainer. In terms of a leader, I can only go off of my track record. I've had the average management time with my company's 20 years old. We just had our 20th anniversary in February.
Congrats, man.
Yeah, thank you. It's we're pretty proud of that. But on that 20 years, most of the managers worked for me at my last company. So my management group has been together more than 20 years on average.
Wow.
So from that perspective, in terms of leadership and in terms of opportunity and the things that I provide, I work in a high turnover business, but even with a high turnover business, I have about 30% of my employees have been with me for 15 years. So, if you use that as the metric, that doesn't mean I don't make mistakes, because trust me, man, I've made, oh my God, This is the other thing. Before I know we're running out of time, Chris. This is the other thing. I have made 7-figure mistakes. Mistakes that cost me 7 figures multiple times.
Damn.
More than once. So I'm not sitting here telling you I'm super genius and super successful and, that this is, you can do it too. I'm saying I fucked it up. I have fucked it up on multiple occasions, many times, 7 figures, people, big dollars. I've also made 7-figure bets that paid off huge.
Yeah.
So the flip side to it is, you know what happened after I did a 7-figure mistake? Did I cry? Did I go home and, well, I may have wanted to wrap myself up in a blanket and suck my thumb. I may have wanted to do that, but I didn't do it, right? I sat down. What was I? Introspective, self-aware, understand completely what I did without judgment. How did this go wrong, regardless of whose fault it was? Take full responsibility for it. It cost me $1 million plus. Well, fuck, I've had a $3 million mistake. So I've made some serious mistakes in my time. And figure out why and don't make it again. And then put my feet on the floor the next day and go, God damn it, now I got to go make up $3 million. How the hell am I going to do that? And then you go bet again on the next thing, taking all the knowledge and wisdom that you gained from the $3 million mistake and move forward. And that's what, that's what it takes. That's what you have to be able to do.
It's gold. I want to hear the final takeaway that you really want our audience to get, implement, and take massive fucking action on, Jerry.
I want people to know, go back to what we started. I want people to know, I want them to understand what's possible, that if I can do it, it's difficult for me, Chris, believe it or not, even as I sit here and rattle on for an hour, I hate talking about myself because I don't see myself as anything special. But as I've gotten older, I see where I can maybe have an effect on people that come from where I came from. If I can do it, I have zero education. I didn't know what a mortgage was, people. I knew nothing about business. I knew nothing about anything but knowing how to work. And then I went out and got all of the experience by working all of these jobs. What you're capable of, what you can do, if you could look through my eyes for 5 minutes and see what's in my head, you'd be ashamed of yourselves. You'd see what's possible. You'd see what people are capable of. And I say to everybody around me in my office, and actually I say this to people I meet on the street, I think after 5 minutes that you're way better than you think you are. I think you're capable of so much more than you are. And because I'm looking through this lens that comes from where I came from and have achieved what I've achieved. So you say, Jerry, you don't know what you're talking about because, I got bills to pay. Yeah, I used to pay $25 a month just to keep the electricity on. I couldn't afford the other $150. I get it. I used to beg, borrow, and steal to do whatever I needed to do to live. I've been on both sides of it. What you're capable of, you are discounting almost exclusively, and to everyone, it has been my experience viewed through the lens of my eyes. So that's what I would want to leave everybody with, is you are capable of so much more. And there's some of us out here that see so much more in people than they see in themselves. That's the frustrating part, and that's also the message I'm trying to get across. Because certifiably, Chris, I'm an idiot. I mean, literally, I'm just this intense idiot that attacks everything. I'm not smart enough to know that I didn't know. That's how dumb I am. I wasn't smart enough to know I couldn't go into business. I wasn't smart enough to know that I couldn't become a multimillionaire at 33 years old. I wasn't smart enough to know that my business wasn't supposed to do $14 million 3-4 years in. I wasn't smart enough to know that. I didn't know that. So, but it didn't stop me just because I didn't know it. I went forward with it regardless.
Gold. Jerry, how do people stay connected with you? What do we want them to do next, man?
JerryBrazie.com /Chris Burns will take you to the website. And from the website, you can get to all the social Instagram. We do really regular stuff on Instagram. We're blogging on a regular basis. Got a new website we're just putting up. So you can go see us there. And then we're about 100 and, Billy, how many? 102 podcasts? 103? 105, Jesus, 105 podcasts. That's about an hour long, where you get essentially what you're hearing right now. Poor Billy's got to sit across the table from me and just listen to me rattle on for an hour twice a week. So we do 2 hours a week on a podcast. And so really everything you need to know about me, you can reach out to me. You got questions, I'm happy to help. Again, I'm not selling anything. I'm free of charge. I just want to help people grow. I want to help businesses grow. If I can incentivize, particularly people on the lower end of the economic spectrum, I'm happy to do that. If you're on the high end of the spectrum, you're like, dude, that guy's too fucking intense. I need to meet up with him. Call me, reach out to me, get me on my social, JerryBrazie.com.
Jerry, you are the man. Stay freaking lit, dude. Super proud of you. Thank you for sharing this wisdom with our audience. Everyone who's listening or watching, at Jerry Brazie is his handle, and jerrybrazie.com/Chris Burns. Go check it out and get even more of Jerry. Stay fired up, Jerry. Appreciate you being here, man.
Chris, I had fun. Thanks, pal.
See you soon.